about the RFPs for the Housing Grant. I know we have two of them. So Ray or Gina, could you give us a little more? We just got them, so I
Mhm.
haven't been able to go through it. So
I'll let Gina give a short brief on that.
yeah.
Yeah, so we only received two responses. Um, C C CLP was way out of our price range. We
I
wanted
know.
$86,000. Um, and Fisher was in the price range, but they were missing a few things. And Ray and I were talking about whether they could be given the opportunity to provide them, or if we had to do something else. So, yeah, I just evaluated the Fisher this morning. So, as Ray said to me, look, we don't expect anybody to have digested any of that information yet, but we had it, so that's why we just gave it to the people.
What kind of things were they missing? I did save them. I didn't get to open them up.
Well, I'm not at my desk currently, so sorry, Martha, I don't have that list in front of me.
Yeah, particular things in the RFP that we asked for, like the staffing for the project, the billable hours, those details were missing from their response proposal.
So it wasn't, well, we wasn't that they couldn't do a certain scope of work. It was that they didn't include all the background information.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there
Oh,
were certain items in the RFP that were requested. So, we would want to let them fill in the holes to make it a fully responsive bid.
All right.
all
So
right.
for the CLP, I think I don't know whether they misunderstood what we are asking for, but they had listed there a bunch of member of their staff that really we don't need it for at least at this stage. So we just tell them that respond to them and say, well, it's too, you know, they all knew how much money we were talking about,
They
right?
didn't at first, Leonardo, and maybe Ray didn't think, and when you asked that question, it made me think that maybe if you're going to give Fisher the opportunity to fill in the blanks, maybe you could give the other company the opportunity to know that what the budget is and and ask for them to resubmit. Would that be
Okay.
possible, Ray?
Well, they did know. We put out an addendum which had that budget number
Yep.
of $11,000. So that went out to all the 20 or so that originally got the RFP.
Right. Well, I was just
So,
thinking maybe
yeah,
they didn't read it. They didn't notice it. I don't know. But that's not
we
our
can only
problem.
hold our hands through so much.
I think there's somebody in the waiting room or not?
Chuck, I just let him in.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah.
I've
So,
just I've just called and texted Mike Murphy.
okay.
Okay.
Um, so why don't we then follow that suggestion that give them the opportunity, both of them, one to give us all the information that we need, and the other one just let it know that they are far beyond um, our affordability, I guess. Okay.
Do you did you expect any other consultants to reply who hadn't?
Yeah, there were a couple of early inquiries, phone calls right at the beginning when we first released it. So I thought we'd get something from EDR but Fisher and this CLP were the only two responding.
And what about is it Toma, the one that does a lot of the work for Dryden?
Yeah, they've certainly responded in the past. I didn't hear from them at all.
Hmm. Okay.
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 All right. Well, so do you think if Fisher, so have you ever worked with Fisher before?
Um, no, I've seen some of their products that they've done for the city, but no, I've never had a direct contract with them.
David, have you by any chance?
I have. They're a big company that does a lot of things, so I'm not sure I've worked with whoever put in to do this actual project.
Hmm.
I think I think they're part of the center of government team.
Hmm.
for the county as well.
Okay, so without looking at it myself, it feels like if they can fulfill the requirements, maybe we have a qualified bid and that we can move it ahead without having to reissue it. Do you need a motion from us or anything? Do you need direction from us on this?
Well, as long as there's consensus that we want to go back out to both firms and offer them an opportunity to fill in the blanks, I think we can run with that.
Let's run with that.
Sounds good.
Ryan and Chuck, are you on board with that?
Very much so.
Okay,
And give them some kind of deadline to.
yeah,
Okay, so let's pretend we get a qualified answer that we like from them, say by our next meeting. What's the process? Do we like approve it and ask the town board to like put a motion into the town board or something?
yeah, I would ultimately want to get the town board's approval to enter the contract because they pre-approved a 10% match to this, but it's typical to go back to the board for a final selection.
Okay, does the county have any role in, David? Does the county have any role? Okay,
We just give the money.
Yes, get the money. Yeah.
good.
What's the soonest the contract would start, Ray?
Well, if we could want to approve it at this committee's next meeting in January, it could be on the January town board agenda to approve, and I'm sure they could start work, by the end of January.
Mhm.
I think we had I'm not sure. I have too many RFPs in my head. I think this was like a June deliverable, something like that. Do you remember, Gina?
No, I can look it up.
Yep.
So just go on while I'm looking.
Okay. So, all right, why don't we, unless we have other questions around this, I will ask Chuck to give us a little update on the SAC committee, and then move to David for a little presentation, and then questions and answers from.
I'm going to be very brief. The zoning advisory committee did meet in November, and it's a slow slog. We're going through the definitions on the front end of the proposed new ordinance, most of which have been suggested or reviewed by our consultant. And it's just very slow going definition by definition, and we're still on the front end of definition. So it's going to be a lot of additional work. There is a meeting this Thursday, and that's where we'll pick up.
All right. Any questions?
So I can fill in now that it was a June 1st. That was
Okay.
anticipated completion. What it said.
Okay,
So they
thanks,
would-
Gina.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Does that require a motion, or are we good to go?
I don't think it requires a motion.
Okay.
All right. So we do have a couple of guests today, and our first one is David West. He is the Housing and Community Development Director of the Tompkins County. And I asked him to do a little presentation, and then we'll jump into questions and and time for answer. I hope that we can advance this through 2:45. I know David has to leave before 3, and then we introduce the other guest. So David, you are welcome again to
Thank
our
you.
Housing Committee, and If you don't know everybody, just I can, just very briefly say who they are, and that's it.
Yeah, that would be good. There's a couple of people that I don't know. I think I know most of you.
I'm Leonardo Vargas Mendez. I'm a council person for the town of Dryden, and I chair this committee. Anyone
I'm
else?
Chuck Geisler, living in Dryden, of course, and I've been with this committee, I guess, going on 3 years.
As we already established, I know David from work at the county.
All right, good. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm Ryan. This is, I think, my second month I'm here. David, I think we've worked together in the past. I know we've crossed paths before, maybe during campaign stuff, honestly. Uh, so nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Who is there?
Lauren?
Okay.
And Mike Murphy is just coming into
Yeah.
the meeting right now. He's the mayor of the village of
Good.
Dryden. And then,
I know Mike.
and the person in the conference room is Lauren Sparling, who's the deputy clerk out here in Dryden.
Ah, great. Perfect. Well, as some of you heard, I have returned to work at the county after working here for several years, about 5 years ago. And in the interim, I worked for the town of Danby as their one-person planning department, and then was the director of planning and economic development, not planning and sustainability, for the city of Geneva, where I had a lot of hats, including director of the IDA, a local development corporation, managing a 200,000 square foot factory building, among other things. I am just going to run quickly through a presentation about what Tompkins County Planning and Sustainability's housing group does. So we're kind of a subgroup within the planning department. It's newly 2 people, and I would say that's really like 2.5 plus our deputy commissioner and commissioner. So we're expanding our capacity. This is a new position that was created when I came into it. So there's some work going on of what is it that we're going to do? How are we going to grow and do more? First, I want to start with our grounding, which is in the Tompkins County Comprehensive Plan, which is based around the development focus areas strategy, which looked at the whole county and where we have utilities and where we have transit service and where we have existing development, and identified areas where we want to focus our future development to avoid sprawling all over the place. There's areas that make sense to invest in having new development where there's existing services, existing development, etc. The county has had a housing strategy since doing a needs assessment in 2016, adopting a strategy in 2017. That strategy set targets for what kinds of development we needed and wanted to see between 2017 and 2025. You'll note it's 2025. So we have tracked how we're doing against that. That's actually what I'm leaving at 3 to report to the County Housing and Economic Development Committee. So a spoiler for you all, we are behind on most of the metrics that we track. There's a couple things that we built, all of the housing that we said we should build. One of those is student beds. We met an existing deficit of student beds and accommodated all additional growth at universities and colleges in the county through this year. So that is going well and on track, and it kind of makes sense because it pencils in the market. And most of the other types of units that we track, we are well behind, overall around 3,000 units behind where we know we wanted to be in 2016. Interestingly, when we look at what we expected for growth of the population of households, those expectations track relatively well. So we really are faced with a deficit, and we need to take this time to look forward and say, what are we going to do on top of all the things that we already do because we're a very busy program that does a lot of good things and has made a lot of progress, but it's not getting us where we need to be at this point. So what do we have in terms of human capital? We have me, I'm the Housing and Community Development Director. I work with Shauna Stevenson, our Housing and Community Development Planner. And then we have a small part of a principal account clerk who helps with our grant management and all things financial. And the Deputy Commissioner and Commissioner of Planning oversee our group. We support the Community Housing Development Fund. We do a lot of reporting and funding through grants. So the thing we were just mentioning, the study for a development area in Dryden was through our Housing and Supportive Infrastructure Grant Program. We also do data analysis and tracking, including our biannual snapshots that show where we are with regard to our strategy goals, and then are involved with a variety of regional, state, and national organizations to kind of coordinate work, housing-related planning work across the county. The main programs that we have are the Community Housing Development Fund, which we staff. It's not a county program, it's actually a collaboration between Tompkins County, the City of Ithaca, Cornell University, the Town of Dryden, and the Town of Ithaca. The core of that is the city, county, and Cornell, where the city and county each put in $100,000 a year, and Cornell puts in $200,000 a year. Our associate members, the Town of Dryden, the Town of Ithaca, put in $50,000 when there is a suitable project within their boundaries. And that's been a great partnership so far. Dryden's most recent contribution, I believe, went to the homes on Freeze Road that are coming soon. We do biannual housing snapshots, which again is tracking against the housing strategy, what we're getting versus what we need. We support municipal planners with trainings. We manage CDBG funds, which is federal funds through HUD that we apply for that do single family rehabilitation. We're involved with INHS as kind of our service provider on that, and we're just about to submit for an extension of our current program. CDBG funds are not very reliable at this point. We're not sure how many more of these programs we'll be able to do or in what form, as HUD has been changing a lot of things. But so far, we've been applying for money that the state already has from previous years. And we hope we'll be able to continue that. It's been a successful program rehabilitating single-family homes for low-income homeowners. In the next year, we're going to be doing the next round of a combined housing needs assessment and strategy. And we work together with our partners. I'm going to very quickly gloss over these programs. We talked about the Community Housing Development Fund. It's supported over 1,000 affordable rental and for sale units to date. In the most recent round, we gave up to $30,000 a unit for rental housing and up to $80,000 a unit for sale housing. I'll say the rental housing usually gets much less than that because there's a per project cap. So generally, we spend between $3,000 and $10,000 on a rental unit, and most of the time the for sale are at the top of whatever we're giving, which used to be $30,000, then $40,000, and now $80,000. To really make a rental for sale unit affordable, it really needs about $250,000 in subsidy on top of what someone can afford to pay for it. But this has leveraged a lot of private, state, and federal. So we've put in $8.5 million. Just this year alone was our biggest year, $1.35 million, thanks to funds from the IDA that were taken from developers of market rate housing in the city of Ithaca. So developers that want pilots within the city of Ithaca's pilot area, they have to submit either to giving dollars or including affordable units in their buildings. It's much easier for them to give dollars. So that from the last several projects that have gotten pilots, that money is finally accruing and coming through the program. So it's great to be able to give out $1.35 million This year, because there was kind of a hump of a lot of projects at once and the money's been slowly coming in, I don't expect that we're going to have more years in the near future that are as generous as this one. But it was a good moment to be able to fully fund a lot of applications and get some good housing going. These are just some examples of the variety of projects that this program's funded over the years, everything from one-off single-family home, new construction, rehabilitation, multifamily townhouses, for sale, rental, downtown, out in the country, all over the county. Our Housing Supportive Infrastructure Grant gives grants between $5,000 and $10,000 to municipalities to do good housing work. We try to make it easy to apply for, and this year we gave out 3 awards for a total of $29,900. Our county legislature dipped into their reserve funds to go above what we were budgeted, which was only $10,000. So they saw 3 good projects, wanted to fund all of them, and we're glad to be able to do that. One of them being that master plan at Dryden. We talked about the housing snapshot, work with municipal planners. Our next task will be a countywide zoning analysis, giving municipalities ideas of how their zoning compares to other municipalities in the county and to kind of best practices for housing-friendly communities. That'll be coming out in the new year. And we did a big training earlier this year for planning and zoning board members across the county. And going into 2026, we are looking at a big planning effort towards what's our strategy, what are the things that we're going to do, collaborating with the IDA and municipalities to do for housing in the next 10 years, essentially. What are the steps that we're going to take? It's going to be a combination of what do we need in the market, but also what can we do to make this work better? So it's a combination of policy and what we hope to see. And I'm always happy to come to any kinds of meetings like this. Housing is a very broad area and a big problem in our community, so I'm happy to just sound off on ideas and questions. I think what brought up the idea of me coming is a series we've been running called the Local Motion Strongtown series, Local Motive Strongtown series, which was 8 lectures. And one of them that I was most excited about was on pre-approved building plans, which municipalities are adopting pre-approved plans for homes, ADUs, small multifamily buildings that you can then have someone who wants to build them just come and get a building permit and jump over having to go through an expensive planning board review, historic commission reviews, other things that can add costs and uncertainty for projects that are kind of low risk. So I thought that was a great presentation. It's something that I hope to see more municipalities take advantage of. The city of Ithaca actually got one of our housing and supportive infrastructure grants to hire someone to create some pre-approved plans for deployment in the city of Ithaca. And I'm happy to talk about that or other housing related things.
Well, thank you. So we open up for questions and conversation and so forth. Anyone wants to take the lead?
See Martha's hand.
Hey, thank you, David. This is great. It's a little shocking to say, oh, right, we had those goals at the county for up to 2025. Like, oh, it's 2025, isn't it? It's almost
Yeah.
over. No, this is great. It's time for another strategy. I'm obviously it seems really important. Great to hear that IDA and the municipalities are fully involved. Is there anything if the housing fund had more money? Sounds like you were able to use the IDA's money. if you had more money on a regular basis, would it make a meaningful difference? When I was on the program oversight committee, Lenny Skrill would say, well, your dollars are a sign of good, a sign of approval, but
Yes.
the local dollars were never going to actually pay for the units. We never had that kind of money. So would it make a big difference, for example, if Cornell, instead of the 200,000 that they agreed to in 2009, if we saw some inflationary value to their contribution, for example, would that matter with how many projects you could approve at the housing fund?
So I think some interesting conversations we're having at the Housing Fund between the partners right now. The political pendulum always swings a little bit back and forth. And when we look at where we put money, a conversation that we had when I previously led this program and Martha was on the legislature was how useful are our dollars in low-income housing tax credit projects? So a LIHTC, just short for low-income housing tax credit project, is generally $20 to $40 million project, almost never smaller than $20 million. And the subsidy provided by the government, exclusive of our funding, is substantial. But the way it works is it's a neoliberal conception where instead of just giving money to the developer to build the housing, the developer is given a right to a certain value of tax credits and then sells those tax credits to a corporation with tax liability who wants to reduce their taxes. So maybe they pay 70, 80 cents on the dollar to reduce their taxes because obviously they're not going to pay one for one. There wouldn't be any value there. But two quirks of that program are important to understand. One is that program specifically excludes the cost of land from their calculations of what a project deserves in tax credits. So it kind of has an incentive to choose cheap land. And it also gives priority to high performing school districts. So it's kind of the opposite of what we would like to see of encouraging development in downtowns. It ends up encouraging development, in greenfield sites in wealthier suburbs. And there's reasons that they do that, but it conflicts a little bit with our priorities. So it can be good to have our money in a project where, the land is going to cost 500,000 to $1.5 million rather than a bigger lot. I think about Milton Meadows in town of Lansing. I think they paid $30,000 for that land. Whereas something like the Women's Community Building Breckenridge in downtown Ithaca was much more expensive. So our money can help there. You were right, it does help our projects compete at the state level. We're showing that we have more local commitment in the project, and that helps them compete. And previously, it was definitely my stance that we got kind of maximum points at putting in around $100,000. So we were trying not to put in the full 300,000, which is the max we have for a rental project. Unless there was extenuating circumstances like a very expensive site. Unfortunately, the value for those tax credits has been falling. So the amount that the market is willing to pay to the affordable housing developer to get the tax credits has been going down. Those projects are getting harder and harder to do. At the same time, I was talking about political pendulums. There's been a lot more talk lately about trying to really focus on for sale housing, which we have to put a lot more subsidy per unit into a for sale project. For a LIHTC project, we're usually around $3,000 a unit. For a for sale project, now we're putting in $80,000. And the money doesn't stretch nearly as far, obviously, when you're putting 80,000 into a project instead of 3,000 for each unit. So at some point we have to decide what's the relative value. Obviously, our for sale projects we require to be affordable permanently, which is great. We love supporting more for sale units. You'll see in our recent snapshot when we compare the cost burden of owners and the cost burden of renters, the cost burden for owners is going down and the cost burden for renters is going up. It's the situation for renters is getting more and more tight, and there's a pretty good case for continuing to invest in more rental housing. Although I will say the market's getting a little sloppy at the top end of the rental market. But that's not something that we ever subsidize. It's just, what developers decide to come in and do. But we are seeing vacancy at the most expensive rentals start to creep up.
Okay, so just quickly to follow up, would it matter
Would it
to
help?
try to lean on Cornell to get a little bit, like 2009 was a long time ago. right?
Yeah. No, I think that it would have been a really good idea, both in our strategy and in this to set up inflation indexed amount, because every year the money is worth less
Right.
than it was the previous year. And one of the things we have been tracking is how many homes sell for 200,000 or less. Every year $200,000 is less than it was before. And in 2016 you couldn't build a house for 200,000, and there was people trying and failing, but now you can barely build a house for 400,000.
Chuck, and then
Thank you.
Chuck, and then Mike.
Okay.
Chuck,
Am I
You're
going
muted,
to-
Chuck.
Okay.
Chuck, is you?
There. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Sorry about that. David, thank you so much. This is very helpful and looking forward where the county wants to go. And a couple questions based on your slides. One had to do, you ended up talking about the needs assessment and sort of projecting forward.
Mhm.
Will the needs assessment, maybe you could flesh that a little bit. Will it include actual surveys of landowners or of the different towns? And I guess an extension of that is, I know that land use planning, regulation, et cetera, is the responsibility primarily of the towns, but with guidance and some advice coming from the county. Are there ways that, for instance, if our town, Dryden, were to develop a 1-year plan, that we could conform more closely with what is emerging in the county as priorities and key directions? For instance, we overlap substantially, I think, in our interest in our focal areas in our comprehensive plan, and you have your equivalent to focal areas at the county level. And then a third question is, I don't really understand if IDA funds can be used or are used in the towns. It seems like most of the money, tax abatements, et cetera, happen in Ithaca.
Yes, so I'll try to do those in reverse order, and if I forget one, you let me know. But the IDA one is easy. The IDA funds can be used anywhere in the county, even though the abatements, I think all of them originate in the city. There's also a density area in Lansing that is covered under that policy, but I'm not sure what abatements have come from Lansing under that area. There is also an opportunity for more municipalities to adopt something like CTAP in the city that would require, in exchange for pilots, for projects to add to this fund. I think we are seeing a slowdown in construction, particularly of large projects, so I'm not super bullish on the possibility that we're going to get a lot more of that funding in the short term. But it is a good long-term way of thinking. There's definitely potential there. You mentioned what could Dryden do in terms of a 1 year plan that would vibe well with what we're doing. I love the idea of 1 year work plans. I just would caution that all of this stuff is very long term. Um, and it's great to have 1 year things that you're going to get done in a year. And I will say from the Strong Towns messages that we've been pushing and connecting people with through the local motive series, they're all about what can we do next month? What is there something that we can move the needle immediately? And I think that's fantastic. And there definitely are little things that we could do. There's some pretty low-hanging fruit. For example, the state has this great new program for they call them cross mods. They're basically HUD mobile homes on permanent foundations that the state is providing a ton of funding for. But in order to apply, you need control of 10 lots in one municipality that has adopted some resolutions. And 10 lots doesn't seem like a lot, but I don't have 10 lots. And if that's something that we could work together on to find 10 lots that could be ready for a home in Dryden, that would be a really concrete and I think achievable thing that could be done. And that they have to be lots that would be fee simple for sale, mobile homes on individual lots. But the state's program is great. You get a real mortgage on it. It does really good things. Honestly, they're really targeting places like Syracuse that have, 600 vacant lots in a land bank and want to fill them in. And that's not a problem that we have, but it's a really good nuts and bolts program that covers basically the full costs. At least they conceive of it to cover the full costs. We always find sometimes that, when the math works out, it's not quite the full cost, but they're trying to cover the full cost of the difference between what someone could afford as a purchaser and what it costs to do. And they've worked out deals with the home building factories. And yeah, it's a great program. I just don't have 10 lots to contribute.
My last question had to do with the survey and whether the
Yeah.
needs assessment is going to materialize that way.
So the needs assessment will be based on demographic trends and market trends. So, which is different from a wants assessment of what kinds of housing or what housing we wish there was. It's literally looking at our household sizes, our incomes, and what housing we have to tell what is needed. So I don't expect there to be a survey component on that one, on the strategy. I think there's definitely a place for community involvement, and a survey will probably be one of them. But the needs assessment is very quantitative, so I wouldn't expect it to be based on kind of subjective survey responses.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mike?
The question on, you say you don't have 10 units available. So you're basically saying property that the county owns or whichever agency. So if one of these, say, Town of Dryden bought a piece of property, could it be then when they process it, would they get reinforced, get back their money that they bought the property with so that you could get up to 10 units?
No, that's a kind of one of the things about the project is they expect the land to be coming in for free. So the town, if the village, say there was a village lot and you were willing to subdivide it into 10 units that could then be sold, you would obviously get taxes from those 10 units. They would go up in value a lot. So you would have new revenue. But I'll have to look at the program and I'll email you back, Mike, but I don't think that the program includes a land sale price in their calculations. They might, but I don't think they do.
Well, but you said something about if we own. So if we own some land that was not to be used,
Yeah.
we could use that.
Yes.
We at some point paid for it or got it.
Yeah.
It's not when they take it over by taxes because they, then you get it. But you own a piece of property and we could subdivide it for one or two lots or whatever it is
Mhm.
and be in the project. And what more money would come from the village other than giving the land?
Um, I think that that could be enough. Um,
That's the
I
way
think
I
you would,
have the land
yeah,
and get an agreement that
yeah,
somebody will come and you have to have 10 because they don't want to do it less than 10
yep,
and they'll do it. But there's little always details.
yep.
Okay. And one other question, you said in the beginning that you guys are going to work on infrastructure, I think in one of your categories. What are you talking about and doing in that area?
So I think that one of the maybe missed opportunities or oversights we've had is we have, as a fundamental basis of our kind of countywide planning perspective, these areas where we want to see development happen. A lot of those, when I was the planner for Danby, there's a development focus area in central Danby, which is the hamlet. It's a great spot for development. It has no water or sewer. Um, and we say we want, walkable village scale development there. You can't do anything even close to walkable without um, water or sewer. So I I know that that strategy, the urban core is served by infrastructure. In the hamlets that are rural centers, they mostly have their infrastructure is electricity, road, sometimes gas if you're lucky, but they don't have water and sewer. And figuring out if there are any of those that it makes sense to be involved with extending additional utilities to, I think is one of our challenges over the next 10 years of how do you make that happen? Um, South Lansing is kind of a particularly interesting one that there's like sewer approaching but hasn't gotten there. The town there owns a huge parcel that could have a lot of housing on it, but it needs sewer to make that happen. And I will say our water and sewer is probably one of the most complicated things in development in the county. It's a myriad of different um, agencies, organizations, partnerships between municipalities, things that are connected across different agreements, makes it extremely complicated. And I think there's some role for additional organization thinking around that model and how we can make it work better together.
Thank you.
Martha, just quick.
Yeah. Quickly, David, I think you talked to Gina about land bank options, and I know Chris Brown is waiting to talk to us about that. I think you had some opinions about whether that would work in Tompkins, and before you go, do you have a couple of words on that?
Yeah,
Because,
so
because it just says back to this whole issue of site control. I mean, Cornell has more land than anybody. They never let go of it, although
mhm,
they do have long-term leases that might be an option here. But
yeah. Yeah, so I think Chris is going to talk about community land trusts, which are such a fantastic, amazing tool, and we have, I think, a very good one with INHS, but there are also kind of more municipally focused community land trusts that um, there's several different models, and I don't want to preempt whatever it is that he's going to present there. And Chris, I wish I could be here for your presentation. I'm sorry I have to jump off. Um, because community land trusts are one of the things I nerd out about a lot. But a land bank, so there has been conversation about whether or not Tompkins County should have a land bank. Often places that have a land bank have a lot of foreclosed properties. And the thing about instead of just auctioning those properties off, you can hold them in a land bank. And sometimes that requires you to do some maybe environmental cleanup, maybe demolition of houses that would be too expensive, especially in low value markets to demolish before sale. It can be other things that enhance the value of the property, like clearing or getting infrastructure there or getting it rezoned so that denser development can happen to it. Land banks can do all of those things. The skepticism that I have, as much as I love the idea of a land bank in Tompkins County, our property is so valuable that very little property each year goes to auction. So a place like Syracuse has hundreds and hundreds of vacant lots within their land bank. And, even if they just put them all out to auction when they are foreclosed on, they would find that they are often selling for $1 or for $500, and it costs $10,000 just to process a transaction to sell land. So when you're selling land for, $1,000, $5,000, the government is actually losing money just doing that process. And you're getting it into speculative hands that often will sit on it forever and not do anything. Or, there's a problem in a lot of cities that have low housing values that people will buy something out of foreclosure at an auction, and then you can rent out even a pretty bad house for $1,000 a month for several years and let it go back into foreclosure, and you paid nothing for it and you didn't care about it. In our market, most of the properties that are headed towards tax foreclosure auction, the taxes get cured before auction. I think this year we auctioned off 9 properties, as opposed to even when I worked for the city of Geneva, we auctioned off 40 properties in a year. And there it made more sense to pick out properties to hold. I will say Tompkins County does review, and I review from a housing perspective, and other people review from an environmental perspective, the homes or properties that are in the tax foreclosure pipeline. To pull anything, if it's within an area that we've said is a unique natural area, we pull it and we'll put a conservation easement on it. If it's in an area that we've said a trail should go through, we'll keep it so we can have the trail there, things like that. But the volume of properties going through that is extremely low, because the property is valuable enough that somebody will come in and pay the taxes to keep it from foreclosure auction. And if it does go to auction, it sells for a substantial sum.
Thank you.
That's not to say it could be a very proactive approach to housing, could be building a war chest of funds to go and purchase properties, and occasionally get these key properties from foreclosure, to then proceed towards development. But it's a much more expensive, risky undertaking, which I think is why we haven't seen it happen here.
Thank you, David. This will be a good way to introduce Chris and lead us to the conversation. And I thank you so much for being here and giving us some more of a view what is happening at the county level.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to come back anytime.
Okay.
Before David goes, I do want to speak to just one aspect of land banking. Land banks aren't required to only acquire properties from the foreclosure lists. They can acquire properties however they'd like. There are a lot of different things that you can do with land banks. They're really flexible tools. We are in a similar situation, I think, to Tompkins County here in Columbia County, as far as our land values, our property values, the types of properties that end up in foreclosure, that end up going to auction. Our main thrust for creating the land bank was the state keeps funding them. There aren't a lot of mechanisms, a lot of funding mechanisms that you can rely on an annual basis coming out of the state. And land banks are one of the few. So we created a land bank with the hope that the state would continue to fund them. Somewhere in the creation of the application to Empire State Development to create the land bank, a Supreme Court decision was handed down that has significantly changed not just how land banks operate, but how foreclosure sales are conducted throughout the entire country. It has very much changed how land banks operate. We, because of both the value of our properties and the new reality of how foreclosure sales operate after that decision. We don't really focus on foreclosed properties. We consider ourselves a site control mechanism. We partner with other nonprofits that do most of the work, but we're happy to use state money to buy properties the second they become available, if we can.
Oh.
So I guess that's a bit of a segue.
Yeah, it's a segue. Yes,
It's
exactly.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And I hope I can get the recording of this because I'd love to hear it.
All right.
Thank you, David.
Thank you,
Thank you
David.
so much, Chris.
So Chris is thank you for being here, visiting us, our housing committee for the town of Dryden. That's the short way of it's a long title for the committee. Since we already started the conversation, I guess we can start expanding on the idea of land banks and the work you're doing through the Trillium Land Trust, Community Land Trust Corporation.
Sure. I'll start with the land bank. So is anyone I do want to touch on some of the things I just mentioned. Is land banking something that the housing committee is considering making a referral to the county about?
It's learning about how they operate, what they
Okay.
are, how they operate, and then maybe making a decision of what will work here in the town.
So I guess broadly, I'm going to assume no knowledge, right? I think that's one of the easiest ways. Thank you. So that's usually how I operate. So land banks were basically allowed to be created in New York State in 2011 with the passage of what's colloquially referred to as the Land Bank Act. This is Article 16A of New York State not-for-profit law. They're not just nonprofits, they're also public authorities vested with certain powers from the New York State legislature, which is really what allows them to do most of the work that they do. They were initially created, 2011 was not too far after the 2008 housing foreclosure crisis. That is what land banks were initially enabled in New York State to address, were issues of disinvestment, especially in inner city areas, much more urban parts of the state. Over time, land banks have really become a much more rural tool. I shouldn't say the vast majority. There are 31 land banks in the state currently. Over half of them operate in rural counties. Certainly ours is one of those. We are the second to most recent land bank that was created, I believe. What has really changed how land banks operate and how foreclosure sales operate was a Supreme Court decision in, I believe, May of 2023. The case itself was Tyler versus Hennepin. So this was out of Minnesota, Hennepin County. What happened there was a woman who was living in a home that she owned, and she ended up having to go into hospice care. She moved into hospice care, still owned her home, but stopped paying the taxes. After 3 years, it was foreclosed on. It was sold at auction for, I want to say, $140,000. Her back taxes owed were about 10 grand. So her family fought that all the way to the Supreme Court. They considered it a taking. There's $140,000 of value there, and 130 of it disappeared. So the Supreme Court sided with her family. The upshot of that is, in New York State anyway, what foreclosure sales now look like, you have to determine what the surplus is between what the back taxes are and whatever other fees might be owed to. FGU is a term. It's the foreclosing governmental unit. So I assume in Tompkins County, the county probably handles all the tax foreclosures outside of the city of Ithaca, or even possibly within the city of Ithaca. So whatever is owed to the foreclosing governmental unit, that's basically the floor. And then you have to determine the surplus value of the property. 2 ways to determine that. One is public sale. Whatever it sells for at an auction, that's the market price, right? So say somebody owes $10,000 in back taxes, it sells for $50,000 at an auction, the surplus is $40,000. The other way to determine value is to have a private appraisal done. So without absent an auction, just the county owns a piece of property. They want to know what the value is, they can get it appraised. The same story. So whatever the difference is between the appraisal and the fees owed to the foreclosing governmental unit, that's your surplus. Why that matters, the surplus has to be placed into a court, county court, town court, city court. They place the surplus in an escrow account. the previous property owner has 3 years to claim that surplus. So if you've got someone that hasn't paid taxes for 4 or 5 years, gets foreclosed on, it gets sold at auction, whatever the difference is between what they owed and what that property sold for, that previous owner now has 3 years to come forward and claim that surplus. Clearly, that changes how land banks work, because typically how they worked was a county or a city would foreclose on a property. They would sell it to the land bank for, in many cases, $1, very often less than $200 or $250. So land banks' acquisition budgets were very low. They spent most of their money on rehabilitating properties, doing some of the pre-development work like environmental control or environmental remediation. Very often demos were a large budget item. Now acquisition is the Columbia County Land Bank. I am sending a budget modification request to New York State Homes and Community Renewal later this week to place 90% of our budget into our acquisition line item. So we won't really be a developer or a rehab organization. We're really just here to collect parcels and then try to transfer those to affordable housing developers. We are so new that we haven't completed our first batch of transactions yet, but that will be happening in the next 2 or 3 months or so. The way that we designed the land bank was we would look at the foreclosure list first. If there was anything on there that the land bank board thought could be a viable parcel specifically for affordable housing, we go to that town. So wherever we've got 18 towns and 4 villages that the county handles foreclosures for. So we will go to that town and basically make the case that the land bank would like to have this parcel transferred into the land bank for the express purpose of affordable housing. We ask that they pass a resolution. Once that resolution is passed, then it comes back to the land bank board, and that's when we start having conversations about it. So that way, in no way, shape, or form does it seem, hopefully, to residents throughout the county that the land bank is just this county mechanism that's sucking up all these properties that could be, being sold as side lots or what have you. The other big piece as a rural land bank, was it David? Was that the previous speaker?
Yes.
David. David mentioned the issues of, asbestos and lead removal, all these issues of owning buildings that are in disrepair. We don't intend to purchase anything that has a building on it unless we know we're going to knock it down. Our land bank doesn't really want to get into the rehab game. We've got plenty of nonprofit developers, well, not plenty. We have enough nonprofit developers in our region that we can pull in to work on the rehab. So we are just focusing on vacant lots. What our market looks like, and I know Tompkins County also has a market that is always hot. I have 7.5 acres of, it's 2 parcels, contiguous parcels, 7.5 acres. They're vacant. They're in the middle of, very rural area. There's no infrastructure whatsoever. There are no amenities nearby. The appraisal came back at $125,000. The back taxes are about 35 grand. So that 90,000 delta is going to be held by the court for up to 3 years until the previous owner can claim them. Because of that, we are getting away from the foreclosure sale game immediately. So we've pivoted to first looking to see what properties are out there that are owned by towns or villages in the county, especially properties that towns or villages would like to divest themselves of because they're quote unquote problem properties. And because of that, we've found a mill that it's 200 years old and probably should have been demolished 100 years ago. It's not quite a brownfield, but pretty close. So we've identified that as an infill target. We are specifically looking to use that Move in New York program that David mentioned for that. We've got a developer lined up. So that is one half of the nonprofit, response that Columbia County has mounted. For larger context, much of our housing response at the county level is about 3 years old, which is when I started this job. I started here in January of 2023. About 3 months before I started, the County Board of Supervisors impaneled a 12-person housing task force. One of my duties is to manage the activities of the task force. And what it's really become, probably similar to the housing committee at the town level, is sort of a sounding board for ideas about strategies that we would recommend to the county. Certain grants that we wanted to prioritize to go after that we thought made sense for our rural area. We have 6 areas that have water and sewer throughout the entire county. maybe 300 households outside of the city of Hudson that are on public water and sewer. So we've identified programs like the Plus One ADU program. That was a grant that we went after at the end of 2023, and we received $2 million for that. Creating the land bank was one of the highest priority items. The other nonprofit that we started, which I think has come up a couple of times, is we is a little bit, I should back up. I wear like 6 hats here at the county. So I'm going to say we a bunch, and I'm referring to different entities. So I'll try to clarify whenever I remember. The Trillium Community Land Trust is it's a resident-led nonprofit. Some of those residents happen to be professional practitioners in the realms of housing and land conservation. It's a 5-person board. Again, this is another pretty new organization, happened to be enshrined at the state the same week as the land bank. So the land bank and the CLT are basically coming up together at the same time. The CLT also has its first 2 projects lined up. We're really excited. I'm personally very excited about the financing mechanism for our first project. And it's really kind of become the thesis for what the Housing Task Force will be working on in 2026. It's this concept of organized philanthropy. We have a pretty significant amount of wealthy folks in the county and wealthy altruistic folks who come to a lot of housing meetings and ostensibly care a lot about this issue, but to date have not donated any land or money to addressing the housing situation. And that really feels like it's starting to change, because we do have these 2 new nonprofits that are professionally managed that are now 2.5, 3 years old, and really are starting to get their legs under them and are ready to start undertaking projects. There's some research there's an organization called the Center for Community Progress based in Baltimore. Primarily, the center deals with issues of vacancy and abandonment, but there's some research that they've generated over the years that areas that are serviced by both a land bank and a community land trust benefit from this virtuous cycle where land banks can acquire properties relatively easily, much less easily than they could have 5 years ago before that Supreme Court decision, but still relatively easily, and they have quite a bit of financing available from the state. And then community land trusts do a great job of getting that property into the hands of developers that will then create affordable homes. And in the CLT model, knock on wood, affordable in perpetuity, as much as anything is in perpetuity in this world. So you kind of get this virtuous cycle of acquisition and disposition where you're acquiring properties for relatively small investment or just a public investment that doesn't come from the local community, and then getting into the hands of a local nonprofit that then steers that into permanent affordability. What else have we done? We did a housing study prior to the pandemic, so that's basically useless to us now. We do have something called the housing brief that was put together by our regional research and data collection organization called Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. A lot of the work of the Housing Task Force and the county is based on the housing brief. I will say that things have gotten worse for us as far as our housing market goes since we've started this work. We are now, I can make the case that we are the least affordable county outside of New York City in all of New York State. The situation that we are at now for homeownership, if you are a 2-person household in Columbia County that earns 120% of our AMI, you cannot afford a median priced home, even if you put down the traditional 20%. You are priced out of our median housing market, even if you're earning 120% of the area median income. There are 3 counties where that's true in all of New York State. There's us, and then there's one in Manhattan and one in Long Island. So we are one of the least affordable places to live in the state. Our rental situation is not much better. One of the numbers that I pulled over the past couple of weeks, how many apartments are available to folks not at the AMI, but at the actual wages that our local jobs pay. So 89% of the local jobs in the county. So these are not people who live in the county that have jobs. These are the actual jobs that exist in the county, half of which are filled by people that commute in every single day from outside of the county. So 89% of those jobs pay below 100% of the area median income, and we have 32 apartments available for those people. That's 14,000 jobs, and there are 32 apartments. Now, part of that is just the reality of being a rural county. much of that is a reality of being a rural county whose housing market is wildly impacted by people fleeing New York City and also just decades of underbuilding. I see there is a question, so it's a good place to pause.
I thank you, Chris.
Yes.
Last night I watched the program that you did with Shelter Force that Gina had suggested to us. But let me. Every county is different, obviously. I'm looking at my notes. We have the Finger Lakes Land Trust, which is our conservation land trust, and they do a tremendous. They're well established. They've done a tremendous amount of work, and they do a number of counties all around the Finger Lakes. We have Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services, which is our major nonprofit housing developer. They're not just in Tompkins County, also they're also in other counties, but they have a housing trust where they own and retain the land, and the housing is for sale. So they have income qualified owners that then they get a 2% escalation in the value every year. Can only sell it if they sell it after 10 years. They can sell it for just a limited escalation, etc. So it's permanently affordable, and the value is written down because INHS maintains ownership of the land itself. What we're trying to figure out is what we don't have a land bank, as David was saying, and like how would I understand you've worked with the Conservation Land Trust in your area, but you're doing housing. How I'm trying to figure out how any of this could apply to us, and would this be a way of enticing Cornell to get involved? Because as I said earlier, they have a lot of land which they want to maintain ownership of, but they don't use it all. They have a lot that they don't use, they just hold on to. If you can give us any suggestions about how a land bank would work for us. I guess that's the question.
Yeah, well, so we have a community land trust as well. So I don't think INHS runs a CLT, but they themselves are not a CLT. I think the CLT is just one of the programs that they operate. I know Ben Carver. Oh,
Sorry, I think I'm just picking up other conversation in my office.
Go ahead.
Yes. So we have a CLT. Our CLT is so that the interaction between affordable housing and conservation has really taken an interesting step here. And I don't know how replicable this is, but we're hoping that it's very replicable. Our Community Land Trust is one of the 16 member organizations of something called the Hudson Valley Alliance for Conservation and Affordable Housing. So this is 8 affordable housing organizations and 8 land conservation organizations from either side of the Hudson River, from here all the way down to Westchester. And basically, these are 2 types of organizations that ostensibly it seems that their missions are at cross purposes and their resources are, you're competing for land, basically. What we have been working on is, the housing crisis has reached such a boiling point that there's so much pressure on trying to find new land for units to maximize the land that you can build on, that it's starting to spill over into the land conservation world. And rather than fight each other about it, we decided to, or I shouldn't say we, I wasn't there at the outset, but the Alliance has decided, look, this is the new reality. Let's figure out how we can help each other. So these are things like cluster housing, the Community Housing and Community Preservation Fund. And I would like to talk about the Community Housing Fund. I think that was one of the hot topics that Charles asked me to take a look at. Yes. So there's a lot of hand in hand going on right now with land conservation groups and affordable housing groups here. Again, I don't know how replicable this will be in other places. I know in the Adirondacks, there's a version of this as well. I don't remember the names of the organizations, but I know that there are some partnerships starting there. The land bank really is I guess just to not sugarcoat it, the land bank is there because the land bank is an organization that can receive state finances to acquire property and rehab properties and demolish properties. There's so much flexibility in land banks as a tool, and I don't want to be a land bank proselytizer and spread the gospel of land banks. They have their demerits as well as their merits, but they are one of the most flexible tools that the state has to offer. The Move in New York program that David was talking about, this is the 10 minimum parcels that you need. That was pretty clearly designed with land banks in mind. It was piloted in 5 cities across the state. I think Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Schenectady, and maybe Albany. The pilot program went pretty well. It was initially conceived as infill development. So if there was a parcel where the land bank had knocked down a building, typically you wouldn't be able to use manufactured or even modular housing to do infill development, but that's what this program was designed to do. My sense of this is this was designed for land banks that had a lot of land and not a lot of bites at what could be done with that land from developers. So the state developed this program where you could buy these modular homes or cross mod homes really at a decent discounted price, and they're good homes. I don't know if anyone saw any of the example properties, but they're solid buildings. And that program goes all the way up to 130% of area median income, which has become, and I think we'll talk about this maybe when we talk about New York State policy and legislation. The income levels of some of the state programs has probably become the biggest focus point for our housing task force. A lot of the state's programs cap out at 80% of AMI or 100% of AMI. And, I'm sitting in a city where you have to earn 180% of AMI just to even be able to apply for an apartment. So that the state program cutoffs don't work for us. And I assume they probably wouldn't work really well in Tompkins County either.
See.
So let me just big picture. So you're saying we set up a land bank and apply to the state and they give us money to buy land. Is that how it works?
The steps are you've got to send an application to Empire State Development. Empire State Development basically reviews the application to create the land bank, and then they step away. Whether they approve or deny it, they're out of the picture after that. All of the financing comes from New York State Homes and Community Renewal. Its land banks have been funded in the state budget, I believe, every year since 2011. I don't think there's ever been a year where they weren't funded at various levels. There are different arrangements between land banks and the entities that create them. Some land banks, Albany County Land Bank is a good example. They receive everything from the county. The county does all the foreclosures for Albany County, even the city of Albany, and everything that they foreclose on gets transferred to that land bank automatically. Other land banks have to competitively bid during auctions, just like everybody else. Some land banks are a budget item in their county or city budget, but wherever you create a land bank, it has to map onto whoever the foreclosing governmental unit is. So I don't believe that the town of Dryden would be able to create their own land bank. It would have to be a Tompkins County land bank. Once you're created, then you apply to Homes and Community Renewal for your funding. Right now they have, and I imagine this will continue to go forward, for new land banks for the first 3 years, you can apply for up to $150,000 of just operations funding. So this is for pre-development services, legal services, insurance, setting up your website, all those little things. Part-time staff, if you want to hire part-time staff. And then there's a separate pot of funds for the actual capital activities, such as acquiring property, rehabbing property, demoing property.
Okay, so you're saying we'd have to convince David.
You would have to convince, what do you have, a county legislature?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have to come out of the county legislature. They would have to pass a resolution. They would be the ones to appoint the board members, the initial board members. But yeah, it would have to come out of the county legislature.
Chuck,
Okay, thanks.
Chuck, your turn.
Chris, in the Shelter Force webinar, which was quite terrific, you said perhaps more than once that limited equity arrangements, CLTs in particular, are the most efficient and most effective way of generating long-term affordability. And, for people that have worked with equity limitation in its various forms, that's almost common sense. It flows from the model. What I worry about in our town and even on our committee, myself included, is that we're not sufficiently literate about CLTs. I know that there are really terrific videos and webinars to be had if we want to apply ourselves. In fact, I would love it if David were to continue his wonderful series of strong towns, but perhaps bend it in the direction of strong CLTs, because our county and our town, in the language of our comprehensive plan, really has strong rhetoric in favor of doing equity limitation for the reasons that you gave. And yet I think, even with INHS doing heroic work on this front, I think we leave it to INHS and assume they're good at it, let them do it, rather than do the homework ourselves and amplify it and use it at every turn and every opportunity. Would you mind, I don't know, just sharing some of your experiences on how to get this into the vernacular and veins and arteries of our housing committee, our planning committee, et cetera?
Yeah,
Can I jump in before you go, Chris?
of course.
And just add to that some local context, something that I'm learning recently, and I was involved when INHS was first starting up their CLT, which they call a housing trust, but it's a very typical CLT. They were just concerned that the Finger Lakes Land Trust name was going to confuse people between the two, so that's why they chose that name. That came out of a history of their organization investing in historically Black neighborhoods that ended up gentrifying those neighborhoods and pushing people out. And we have a very small Black community, and there's a lot of bad feelings about people who got, deferred payment loans or other equity limiting arrangements and didn't understand them. And then families lost homes that they thought they were going to get to keep. They were investing in a neighborhood where it wasn't officially redlined, but it was in practice redlines. By the time they realized that they had basically fixed up every house in the neighborhood, but also pushed out most of the people that they were trying to help, they started the CLT model. But a lot of the damage there was already done, and there's a lot of negative feelings still among Ithaca's Black community and low-income community about equity limitations. And I think some of it is because it hasn't been explained, and some of it is because of those very real negative outcomes. But I do think we could do a lot more to talk about it as a bulwark against gentrification. It's just that we kind of came to it after a lot of gentrification had already happened. And some of that language and explanation about what's good about it going forward, now that the whatever horse is out of the barn or whatever metric you're going to use. Within that context, I'd love to hear more about your experience.
Yeah, I think CLTs, and this is my second go around at CLTs. I tried to start one in the city of Troy about 6 years ago when the state attorney general actually was offering, there was $1 million for new and newly formed CLTs available at that time. CLTs are one of those things, the best time to create a CLT was 30 years ago, and the second best time is today, right? It's just one of those concepts. And yeah, David, I hear that. It's funny. I just had a conversation with one of our consultants, one of our community land trust consultants, or Burlington Associates. They work with CLTs all across the country, and their CLTs still consistently or face lawsuits from people who did not understand how the equity split worked. That amount of upfront communication, I think, cannot be understated, just to let, this is how these work. And we've really pushed that, our CLT has really pushed that hard in our outreach. Most of the pushback that we get, and it's really interesting, there are people who are the people that come to the meetings that the CLT has, the outreach kind of informational meetings, are really concerned about affordable housing and are really interested in new concepts about how to address it. We lose a lot of people when we get to the part where you can't sell your house in 10 years for whatever the market will bear, which is really interesting because that's how we got in the problem that we're in, right? Is people selling their houses for whatever the market will bear. The default state of every piece of property in your town and anywhere else in the state, it's for sale all the time to whoever wants to pay enough money to convince someone to sell their property, right? And that's a real problem when you've got a bunch of wealth flowing into an area that does not generate that wealth locally. So what we've really tried to harp on is that you shouldn't compare CLT homeownership to traditional homeownership. You should compare CLT homeownership to being a forever renter. Because if you're a renter at the end of whatever your tenancy is, if you move or if your lease is up, at best, you're going to get back your deposit, right? At worst, you get back nothing. And now you don't even have enough money for the deposit on your next place. With the CLT homes, you're walking away with half of the earned equity after X amount of years. That likely becomes a down payment for the next house that you buy, whether it's in this area or elsewhere. There's also, the actual community aspect to it. And this sounds a little bit wishy-washy. This is kind of the soft part, not the hard part. But these are member organizations. The people who live in CLT homes and on CLT property, they get some sort of say in what happens with the future of the CLT as an organization, but also the properties that the CLT owns. It is, not to put too fine a point on it, it's an alternative housing market, really. There's the traditional housing market, which is just the default. And then you've got this other one where no one's going to get rich from buying and selling these homes, but they're going to have a place to live. It doesn't necessarily have to be a homeownership option. It can also be rental, which is where the limited equity co-ops come into play. I would say that our state has actually surprisingly become a real leader in limited equity housing policies. Our community land trust has availed itself of 2 consecutive rounds of a program at the state called the Community Controlled Affordable Housing Program. It's a relatively modest sum of money, but there have now been, we just applied for the 3rd round 2 weeks ago, so knock on wood, that happens too. So that's specifically for, these types of CLT homes, limited equity co-ops, whatever the case may be. There are the 2 pots of money under a program called New York State Housing for the Future. There's $75 million available for rental projects and $75 million available for homeownership projects. This money has to be spent outside of New York City. It is specifically, again, for things like limited equity co-ops and community land trust properties. It is wildly undersubscribed, which in state terminology means nobody's applying for this money. Because these 2 programs trigger prevailing wage, and developers are very loath to take on anything that requires prevailing wage. It can add as much as 30% to the development cost of a project. So understandable, but we're also facing a really big labor shortage, so we should pay our construction people appropriately. I guess if the question is how to go about creating a CLT, we took, in a rural area, we took the approach of making our CLT countywide. When we first started really having conversations outside of just our immediate circle, a lot of the towns that we talked to said, this is a great idea. We want to start one too. What you or our fear of what you would run into there is, say the state starts to make more funds available for CLTs, and they are starting to. They made some funds available to CLTs specifically in New York City this past year, which was really annoying. But there are a lot of CLTs in the city. There are about 24 different CLTs just in New York. Our fear was that once the state started making more CLT funding available, if our county had 7 or 8 CLTs, we'd all be competing with each other instead of joining together and having one specific application. So what we've done is anywhere that we are considering operating or purchasing property, we'll reach out to whoever that village board is, town board, if they've got a housing committee, and that becomes our local advisory committee. And they really sort of not dictate, but they influence, what projects look like in the given towns and villages, similar to how the land bank was set up. So it's not just this top-down organization coming in and telling you, here's what we're doing. We're really interfacing with the local residents and the local leadership first. One of the things that Charles wrote in his email that I think, and I mentioned this on the Shelter Force webinar, this has been the biggest value add for our brand new CLT, is having nonprofit partners who already have projects that are, in fairly early stages, who are looking for project partners. The state likes to see extended periods of affordability. The typical default of 10 years or 15 years basically means the public investment it's threatened after those 10 or 15 years, right? Like there's no guarantee that the subsidy will stay within your community after the period of affordability is over. So the state itself tends to give higher scoring metrics to projects that have some sort of longer affordability, and some are built in. Some of the bigger homeownership programs right now, there's one called AHOP, the Affordable Homeownership Opportunity Program. This is every developer's favorite program from the state right now. It's starting to run out of money. I think there's about $30 million left, but it's a really good program. It's up to $200,000 in per unit subsidies for up to 100% of area median income. And that program specifically has two different paths that a project could take towards longer affordability, including community land trust involvement. So our CLT has been reaching out proactively to nonprofits that we know have projects kind of in the hopper, and seeing if there's ways that we can partner with them. And we've had some success in 3 or 4 cases throughout the county so far.
Chris, would you go back, please, to Martha's question about partnering with conservation groups, and why is it in the interest of a conservation group to set aside or give land to a CLT?
So there's two different topics there. One is the land that a conservation group already owns, and then the land that a conservation group accrues. The first one is kind of a non-starter. That was my first question when our organization first joined this alliance of, at that point it was 15 other organizations. They said, "What questions do you have?" I said, "What can we offer you? Like, give us land, right? Like, I don't have anything. This is a fairly one-sided transaction here. You have all the land, we have all this need." Conservation easements are really, really difficult to undo. Some people have told me that they are legally permanent and they're going to last forever. I myself find that hard to believe. It seems like if you have enough money in this world, you can make anything happen. It is the land that is being considered to be given or purchased for conservation groups. Increasingly, we have two, really. We've got the Columbia Land Conservancy and then Scenic Hudson, our two main conservation organizations. They are increasingly looking for opportunities to do, like, you call it mixed use, it's not really mixed use, cluster housing, right? So they pick up 150 acres of land somewhere and they set aside 10 for affordable housing. And sort of the entree there is, the employees of these organizations can't afford to live in this county anymore. We have a real farm incumbency issue. I don't know how much farmland there is in Tompkins County. I assume there's probably a decent amount. Something like 80% of the farmers in the Hudson Valley don't have any heirs, anyone to take on the farm when they're gone. So they're ending up in these conservation easements, which just, you've lost farmland forever now. And it's also land that you can't develop on. At the same time, we have a lot of young farmers who are desperate to farm and they just can't get into the farming market because they can't afford the land. So little pathways like that. And I think that touches on sort of a broader approach. Very often when housing practitioners go to speak to whether it's a community or whether it's elected officials, we're kind of coming from just the housing perspective over and over again. And I think the message tends to get a little bit muddled over time. But we've had some success by bringing in farmers, business owners, conservation folks, people that work for the school district, having this sort of coalition of people telling you, no, housing is also an issue for me. It's hard for me to hire people. It's hard for me to have even a customer base anymore. For the school teachers, you can't live in this county if you're a school teacher in this county. Almost all of our educators commute. That sort of coalition building has really encircled the conservation folks. I really, Charles, I don't know if I can give you a direct answer of if I ran a conservation organization, why would I personally care about housing? It's a lot of storytelling from the housing side about this situation that we're in. But there's also, there's the reality of there's so much pressure on the housing market right now that there has to be a release. And if you don't manage where that release is, it might spill into, areas that probably should be conserved. So it's better, if you're a conservation person, it's better to have some say and some direction in where that's going to happen than to just let it happen to you.
Martha?
Yeah, it remains that the trouble is the Finger Lakes Land Trust is acquiring land where we don't want to build housing, even cluster housing. I mean, we have this, as David presented, I don't know if you saw it, we're on the call yet. We've had a 25-year philosophy of nodal development, of really densifying where we already have infrastructure or transportation, or where those things overlap. Finger Lakes Land Trust is not interested in that, in those properties. So let me just set that aside. You said something about the Affordable Housing Opportunity Program, and it provides up to $200,000 a unit for subsidies. How come we've never heard of this? What is that, out of HCR?
That's out of HCR. Yeah, it's been running. I want to say it started in 2021, maybe. It's the best subsidy program out there right now. You can, I think you need a minimum of 5 units. The 2 AMI levels are 80% and 100%, but there's also what HCR calls a marketing band, which is a pretty new term to me. So if you build X amount of units and you set them aside for folks earning 100% of AMI and you market them, if you can't fill the units, you can go up to 120% of AMI, but you don't have to change the price of the units. It's been really popular.
Who can apply for this?
Nonprofit or for-profit organizations. So it could be nonprofit or for-profit.
Okay.
But yeah, municipalities are not an eligible applicant.
All right. Actually, I'm thinking of Mike Murphy. Where'd Mike Murphy go? He's still there. I'm thinking about the Ezra Village project. Okay. So the developer builder applies.
Would be the applicant.
Wow. Well, that sounds exciting. I didn't know about this. All right. All right.
Okay, so we are at the end of our meeting time. So I guess I will allow a few more minutes for any other question, or for simply Chris saying the last word. And thank him so much for being part of our meeting today. Oh wow.
Well, just the last thing then on AHOP, did you say the money's running out or?
Yeah, I don't remember what they started with in that particular bucket, but I know it's down to $30 million that's left. But the project awards have ranged really, really far. I've seen some as small as $200,000, then some as large as $14 million. So they're kind of all over the place.
We could take $14 million. Okay, thanks very much.
I do want to make sure that I hit on just one particular housing policy. So there's a piece of legislation that's had a couple of bites at the apple, and some of the folks that I work with hasn't passed yet. Some of the folks I work with are considering alternate strategies for the next session. Community Housing Fund, is this a phrase that's familiar to anyone?
Yeah.
Community Preservation Fund might be familiar. That's existed in New York State for a while. So both programs essentially do the same thing. The Community Preservation Fund is something that exists right now at the state level. We're trying to create the Community Housing Fund. Here's how that would work. This is how you fund a housing trust fund or a variety of other housing activities. Whatever your median sales price was at the end of last year, say it was $500,000, because that's just an easy number to remember. So if your median home sales price was $500,000 last year, this year somebody buys a $600,000 home, that delta, so that $100,000 between, becomes subject to a transfer fee. It's a tax. We like to call it a transfer fee. It's a tax. So it's a tax just on that sale. So that delta of $100,000, 0.5% becomes subject to this transfer tax. So 1% is $1,000, 0.5% is $500. So if I'm somebody buying a $600,000 home, the Community Housing Fund says I've got to pay $500 for this particular transfer tax. That gets accumulated into a fund that you can then use for almost anything. You can use it for a revolving loan fund. You can use it to acquire property. You can use it to subsidize somebody's small projects. There's really kind of no limit to what you can do with it. The state level legislation actually sets the threshold. So instead of the median home sales price, they just use $500. So any residential transfer of over $500 is subject to that fee. And then they leave it up to the individual municipalities who opt into the program to set what their threshold is. Median home sales price is the usual metric that I've seen. That's how it works in Massachusetts, who have a similar program. There are some places in the state that already have this legislation available to them, and that's because they petitioned the state to create state-level legislation specifically for their municipalities. That might be the way that this has to happen instead of it getting approved at the state level. The realtors lobby hates this legislation. They hate it with a fiery passion, and I don't think they'll ever let it get passed at the state level. But if it just becomes, I have 5 of my 18 towns that have asked me unprompted, how can I make this happen? So they might just petition the state as a group. I know that one of the towns in Long Island that has created this, in their threshold is $200,000 because their wholesale prices are insane. So $200,000 is their threshold. They also apply it to commercial transactions, so it's not just residential. One of these towns in the past 3 years has brought $14 million into their coffers. Now, I did the math for our county. We're not touching $14 million. If every single town and village in our county had this on the books last year, we would have brought in $700,000, which is still not nothing in a county of 55,000 people.
Yeah.
Chris, if I may, I want to thank you for being comprehensive and generous with your knowledge and your time. And in absentia, I'd say the same thing to David, but it's very helpful to have somebody from a different county that shares some of our problems and opportunities. But this has just been terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I really, that goes back to something that I've talked about here a few times. Nobody's in this alone. I know a lot of the towns within my own county, they don't know that that other towns that are 15 minutes away are also working on these issues. I had a conversation with somebody who is. Do you all know about the Pro Housing Community Certification Program?
Yes.
Yeah. I was talking to a rep from one of our towns about that not that long ago. And they said, is anybody else in the county working on this? I feel all alone. It's like, we're all working on this. We are, it's one of our claims to fame as a housing task force. We're the only county in the state where every single one of our municipalities, I used to say, was enrolled in the program, but now I can say every single one of our municipalities is Pro Housing certified. Wow. All 23 of our jurisdictions received the certification. But, we had towns working on this that were just in their own silos with their heads down. They just didn't have the perspective that everybody's in this boat. So yeah, Tompkins is not alone. Dryden is not alone. I've talked to people from the Adirondacks. I've talked to people from Buffalo. I don't talk to the city people. Their problems are a little different, but the rest of the state, we are in a very similar boat.
Chris, is there an email or whatever, a way to contact you if we want to follow up on the questions?
I will put it in the chat.
Great, thank you. This has really been inspiring and helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't
Right.
help me. Thank you so much. This has been really great. And so this is it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
You
Thank
too,
you,
Chris.
too.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leonardo.
Martha, not Ezra, but Pine Grove or the other people that brought the 10 acres from the deal, they're more likely to be interested. They haven't done anything and they've done a bunch of affordable housing in Ithaca.
Yeah, Park Grove. Are you in touch with them?
Yeah, I had the name wrong.
Yeah. We should talk to them again. They haven't done
Yeah.
anything yet with that land?
No, it took them, we talked about them buying it 3 years ago, but it wasn't until about the last 9 months that they finally got it finished with the state. So I
Yeah,
don't know what.
past the state works, that's right. So they finally closed on it.
Yeah, I don't know exact date, but it was like, oh, they didn't buy it yet, and now they have finally own it, and they're doing other projects, but they might be because to do the
Okay.
house.
All right, that sounds like hey,
You had contact with them or something, I thought before.
I could dig that out again and see if I can find them. Okay, great. All right, interesting.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you so much, guys. Until next month.
See you in January.
Yeah. Happy holidays.
Have a happy holiday.